Okay. Good morning. Hello, LinkedIn. So excited to be with you here today and on a topic that I'm just super proud that we've put together such an amazing panel of Hive members that are going to talk about a topic that I think is more relevant today than when we first even dreamt it up together a little while ago. So we're here to talk about navigating power dynamics in community work. Thanks for all who are attending. Please feel free in the comments to start saying where you're from, where you're joining, your organization. And we're going to kick this off today with all of our lovely panelists introducing themselves. So, Stacy, I'd love for you to go first.
Hi, I'm Stacy Huston. You guys can hear me okay, right?
Yes,
Okay,
perfect.
perfect. I'm the executive director at 6degrees.org. I've been with the organization for going on 9 years. We're a nonprofit that really supports local grassroots organizations that are working at the community level. So think of us as a nonprofit for nonprofits. We do that by connecting them to the resources that they need so they can divert their resources to their core programming. We share their stories to helping to inspire others with the different change makers that are leading these organizations and in this programmatic work. And we also amplify causes through community campaigns to really help create an impact in communities across the country and inspire those to join in. We have 4 pillars, which is youth empowerment, equity and justice, what we call building sustainable living environments, and emerging crisis. So it's good to be here today.
Amazing. Wonderful. Matt Ratz, can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everybody. Matthew Ratz. I am the executive director of Passion for Learning. You can't hear me, Simon?
I can hear you right now. You're good on my end.
Passion for Learning is a nonprofit organization that's been around for 20 years, and our focus is educational equity for low-income youth, specifically in Montgomery County, Maryland, which is right outside of Washington, D.C. I've been in the nonprofit space for a long time. In addition to that, I'm also a college professor, an ordained rabbi, a poet, a dad, and a whole bunch of other things. Excited to be here for this conversation.
Amazing. And my friend Simon, all the way from Uganda, can you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your organization? Oh, and we lost him. Okay, we may have to circle back around. We're having a bit of technical issues getting Simon in. So we'll add him in. Hello to everybody who's joining in on the comments. And we're going to have to jump forward and then we'll have to jump back in time and grab Simon there with his introduction. That's too bad. Okay, so when we started to dream this up, this conversation about community and nonprofit, oh, there he is. Simon, we lost you for a second, my friend. Are you okay now?
Yeah, I am now okay.
Okay. Could you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your nonprofit?
Well, my name is Simon Kiranda and I come from Uganda. I work with a non-profit as well. I'm a founder of a non-profit called Akamwenhu Initiative Uganda, and we are committed to building lives and changing the communities to be the better versions of who they have been called to be.
Amazing. Okay, that's wonderful. We just lost you right for a second there, but we're going to jump in. Okay, so we're going to kick this off by talking about how often nonprofits are deeply embedded in these communities that we serve. I know, Stacy, as you highlighted, you're serving nonprofits through your nonprofit, which is not uncommon and something I love to see. We're going to start by going, how do you define that being truly community driven in your work? What does that look like for you at 6 Degrees, Stacy?
Sure. So 6 Degrees, isn't I should probably go back. I didn't share this, but we were founded by actor and philanthropist Kevin Bacon. So the 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon theory, of some of your nonprofit Hive have heard of it. It's really this idea that we are all interconnected and we all really need community and connection. So it is at like the heartbeat of everything that we hold dear. And for us, it really means how we show up. We want to show up. We want to listen first. We want to make sure that people that are directly impacted by the work of the nonprofits that we're serving, or even the work that we're doing ourselves, are at the center of shaping the programs that we're doing. And a lot of that is content production, campaigns that we're driving, storytelling, those sorts of things. And that can often sound like a lot of fluff. So I do think it's helpful to paint a picture of what that looks like. So unlike some traditional 501c3s, since I said we're a nonprofit for nonprofit, we have direct programming that is used as an amplification. And so for us, it's really, really critical that these organizations are deeply trusted in their communities, and that their staff and teams are reflective of the communities that they serve, because we are coming in and vetting these organizations and trying to uplift them and amplify them. So that's a little bit of how we focus on being community drivers and ensuring that they're at the center of everything they do, and those are the voices on the ground. An example of how we did this in real time was our Building Kits initiative that we do, and that's building essential resource kits and distributing them to nonprofits that we serve. And as we moved across the country, we would often ask our network partners, what do they want in these kits? And, kit builds can seem very simplistic, and they often are, but we would argue that they shouldn't be a one size fits all, because there are different needs. And although it does make it harder and more nuanced to replicate it and do it over and over again, we would say that it is the thing that makes it most meaningful to our partners. It allows us to move beyond the basics and really try to serve them in a very distinct and unique way. So that's some of what we think about.
Amazing. I love that. What about for you, Matthew? What does it mean to be truly community driven in the work you're doing at Passion for Learning?
It's a really good question, but as an educator, my priority is always the students, right? Some of the most disenfranchised voices in the world are the voices of youth. And so our programs really value, we call it student voice and choice, right? The students have a choice over whether they're going to engage in the program in the first place. But then what the program does, what activities they do, what sorts of projects. We have a filmmaking group where students write their own films, right? They generate the ideas. We have, even in financial literacy, the students come with topics they want to learn about, and we design the curriculum around that. We're doing strategic planning right now, and my biggest push was to get student voices and parent voices on our stakeholder survey. Because if it's just the board or just the staff, then we're really not dipsticking in the right way.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
I even want to put a student on our board, but right now we have a financial give-get that's unattainable for a lot of our students. So we would have to adjust our bylaws, which is a whole governance kind of thing. But I think the more representation one can have at the highest levels, the better for the organization.
I love that. And I feel like we'll have to come back to even some of what you just talked about there, about sometimes the people who are using the services not having that voice at the board level, and what does that mean? So I'd love to come back to that. Simon, my friend, how do you define being truly community driven in the work you're doing, which I know you're out in the field often as well. So what does it look like for you?
Yeah, thank you so much. And this is a very resonating discussion. And thank you, fellow panelists. This is something so good. And as a Akamwenhu initiative Uganda, just as we believe in the power to love, unite, and transform rural lives, and we know that transform the people, transform lives. So to me, when it comes to this very kind of point, when we get to look at people that are on the forefront in the community, like the way we do, we just look at this as, pathfinders, because the European way of interpreting a leader is someone who is a pathfinder. Like, you have identified the problem and you're going direct where the communities are. So to me, it's all about pathfinders who have been able to find a path, and they have identified a problem. And it's that problem that will keep on, keeping you on a daily mode, just as because you have been able to find the purpose, the problem. And so as a pathfinder, as a leader who is leading to that, to me, that's how it turns out to be magical in that very area.
I love that. And I think community often is showing us a path, but we have to be willing to listen and
Sure.
be aware of it, right? Which takes time and energy and conversations, and it's very hard to automate a path. And I think that
Very
sometimes
true.
when we have little resources, we try to automate, and I'm not sure pathfinding is all that easy, to do as an automation.
Can I add something real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I love the idea of people who identify a problem. And this is probably beyond the scope of the conversation, but nonprofit organizations generally don't want to solve problems, because if we solve the problems, then we stop existing.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's really innovative to find people who really want to solve a problem, because then the work has an endpoint, right? The problem is solved. We don't have to keep fundraising. We don't have to keep, right, like filling the pockets, the coffers of the organization, because we've actually solved the problem. And it's really, I just think, an interesting and innovative approach.
I couldn't agree more.
That's a really interesting point too, to speak to power dynamics, right? Like those power dynamics are even happening behind the scenes, for finding these solutions and finding and enabling those pathfinders. So for those people listening in, I'm seeing the comments, but the question here, I think, from this little piece that we're just starting with is, how do you define being truly community driven in your work? Because I think that's a reflective question we probably have to come back to more frequently than just, talking about it as part of a 5-year plan, right? I think everybody wants to talk about community, but the community-driven work is actually sometimes more intensive than the other work might end up being. So we're going to jump over to our next question. Matthew, how do we ensure that those community voices continue to just remain central? Because the external stakeholders, like you'd already kind of brought up, boards, they may want to lead, or they maybe dictate some of our choices, but how do you, especially as a leader, how are you kind of trying to bring community voices back into the center?
There are a couple of phrases that I repeat, and one of them is, none of us is a savior. And I caution my board about this regularly. Like, we are not coming in to save people. We're not capable of that, right? We're not superheroes. We're not Jesus. We're not messiahs. We're here to provide a service that addresses a need that the community identifies, specifically lack of educational equity and lack of opportunity for low-income youth, right? That's our mission. So we're not trying to solve the world. And I think when you start with that button and you say to the board or the funders, like, I'm not here to save, I'm here to serve, it really puts the focus on who are we serving. And you're not serving people. The conversation that we had previously, right, where Stacy talked about how her funders want to put really sexy things in the kit, but the community's asking for hygiene, right? And it's like, how do you make the choice between hygiene or lingerie? And it's, the people want hygiene, you give them hygiene, right? And you're not trying to save them. You're not trying to make it sexy. You're not trying to capture headlines. You're trying to serve the people.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic answer. It just really on point to kind of always bring it back to who we're serving. Simon, how are you keeping community voices central as you build in Uganda?
Well, thank you so much. I want to go a bit to what Matthew just talked about, especially when it comes to identifying the problem. And sometimes, when we get to look at that lenses of philanthropic work, they are a bit different. And to me, I want to go back to what a project is. When you get to look at a project, it's simply a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique problem. So sometimes when you have been able to identify that, and the reason that's why I'm coming into fundraise is because there is a need and there is a gap. So as I'm fundraising, I'm working towards ensuring that, be covered. And, it is a temporary endeavor. It's not that it's going to end there, but as we are trying to work on this, we are looking at the angle of what may happen in the next year. So I want to bring it in that area to ensure that we get to look at that in that very angle, as it may differ in a certain kind of a society. So when it comes to this, how we can be able to keep the community central. I want to look at, and I want to bring in an example. One time I was working with my son Simeon, and I told him to shade something. And so I wanted him to shade a picture that was in his mind. But a time came when the crayon that he was using, it broke, and it was not working. So Simeon started crying. So when I was asking him, why are you crying? He openly told me my crayon is broken. And the reason as he was crying, he couldn't continue shading the picture that he wanted. And so here, I learned something within me as non-profit people that are here. We have already identified that what we are doing, it is something that is not for us, but it's for those people. So each one of us, we have got a role to play, just as you see. Simeon was crying because his crayon was broken. But it got broken, he realized he had 2 pieces. So he realized that as he had 2 pieces, there was another piece. So I just simply told him, okay, if you have the other piece and you have the other piece, you're good to go. You can continue shading. So the non-profit space come together and we have got something that we are shading. As we get to shade, we want to see the color come out rightly. So I come with a broken piece, the recipient comes with a broken piece, and then there's a broken piece. So when we put them together, I believe this is something that's going to keep us central. The funder is coming in with a broken piece, the founder is with a broken piece, and then the recipients is having. So when we put them together, that's when we can paint a better picture, and that will give it the momentum to keep going, and everyone is going to remain central here.
I like that example. I love that. I was going to say, my children, I don't think I ever would have put that together from arguments about broken crayons, Simon. But I love that. And I do think that's the piece that sometimes we're missing, is all of the voices coming together and creating something beautiful in the middle, right? Beautiful in the middle.
Sure.
Similarly, Stacy, community voices remaining central. And do you also have an example that you would maybe show, where those voices were centralized versus your external stakeholders?
We are not afraid to walk away from funding. And I can understand that might sound like a privileged point of view, but we do fundraising just like every other organization. We are not a foundation, although often people think we are. I think that this comes down to a scarcity mindset, and it can even tie to the question above, because I think nonprofits operate this way. That's why they don't collaborate as much. That's why they're afraid of merging or partnering with other organizations to do programmatic work in areas that they may do better than another. I think with funders, we're afraid to say, no, it's not the right fit, because there's just not enough out there, right? Because we need every gift. And so we're going to bend and twist ourselves into a pretzel, wear out our people, walk away from our own value system because we are afraid of not being able to find another way. As if sticking to what I call like the capital M mission wouldn't inspire other funders and partners and individuals to stand behind you in that effort. I mean, without going into too much of a derail, this morning, it's like I wake up to images of Black Lives Matter Plaza being dug up from the ground. And I that's what I think this is about sometimes. Just like, well, we have to do this because we're going to lose funding here. So we have to walk away from something that was so important just a couple years ago and is actually still important today, right? So with us, I think that we have a expectation to set up really clear expectations with our funders. If we're not centering the community and the voices, around the mission, then we can't move forward. I always say that funders shouldn't ever dictate the mission. They should just fuel it, right? And a lot of this has to do with trust-based philanthropy, right? Everyone thinks that they can do something better, but you should be working with organizations that you trust, that have given their life to this work, into making this solution come into play and to change lives, however that looks. So for me, it's often just having conversations about long-term solutions that we're not doing things that are just PR friendly for a great impact story. We want to partner with people that see the long-term impact of what they're doing, that they believe in narrative change. And when things get hard, we still have to stand by what we believe. And so for us, we come very direct with that with our funders. And if they're put off by that, then it's not the right partnership. And I think that it's better for our staff and our teams and our communities and the constituents we serve when we stick by that in terms of funders. It doesn't always, I'm not saying that people don't have good intentions, because I don't think it's always that. It just doesn't mean that their priorities are going to align with your priorities as an organization.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that's really been highlighted to me as someone who builds community is we get caught up sometimes in looking for agreement, and that's not necessarily the hallmark of a thriving community or supportive of community voices. It's about alignment, right? Like there's an alignment and agreement are not the same, although we use those words somewhat interchangeably, but that's not correct, right? So I think even if we can get to the spot where external stakeholders are aligned with our vision, they might not agree with everything, and that's okay. And they shouldn't maybe have so much power that they can influence the alignment and, completely themselves too, right? So I love that I know that not all organizations are always going to feel that they can turn down external stakeholders that don't align with the vision, right? I know that nonprofits often sit between community supports and the funding, and that's a really tricky place to live. So this is my next little prompt question for people in the comments. Love seeing so many people are saying lovely things in here. Feel free to throw into the comments, an example of when you were able to kind of remain central to that community voice, or when there was actually unexpected challenges. I'm not sure if any of you want to share a story like that as well, but I think that example is sometimes really hard to find of when we managed to do it. Stacy, you gave a great one about finding aligned groups, but that can sometimes be, I think, the tricky spot of going, there's the challenges of staying, community central, and when does it also work well? When have we managed to kind of pull this off completely? So, all right. The next question I have here, and we're going to put it first to you, my friend Simon, is how do we ensure, wrong one. There's two there. Many organizations talk about dismantling these systemic inequities, but how do we actually shift power back into our communities?
Okay. Once again, I want to go back to what I started with. As we are coming and as missionaries that are solving something and that are working towards understanding their audience, it is clearly, it would be clear if, as my mission, I do understand, and I have to know that it's a path that I'm walking. And as I'm walking on that path, I'm going to find people that are of different, it may be the ages, and so I have to know my target audience. What is that I'm serving? What's the line of the work that I'm doing? What's the mission that I'm running? Like for us, we are focused on ensuring that Romams get the skill set that they need to ensure that as they grow their livelihood, they'll be able to take care of their children and get to know what they really need. So I just want to get it from my fellow panelists, the way she said, that there's no way we are going to be able to do this without us getting to know our mission. We are not just going to impose on them, but we need to listen from what their perspective, and much as we seem to be having and looking around for what they need, but we should be able to listen from them. We may go to them with a wrong kind of perspective. And I want to give an example, like in the rural parts of Uganda where we are working. It is not that every rural mom needs the service that perhaps we may be providing and mobilizing those that are working towards on our way to ensure that we saw, but still, I should take time to clear I should be able to give room to the boundaries. I should be able to take time and properly assess what's that I'm going to give out. Does it answer to what she needs or what they need? Does it address the challenge at hand? Does it, to what extent does it? And I have also to accept that if I am not in line to be able to provide that, I have to find someone else who can perhaps, it may be the assessment. If I'm not good at assessing, I should be able to find a consultant in that area who is going to help and work alongside me. And when we come together, someone who is helping me to rightly assess and I have been able to identify, I should be able to keep it and I should be real to myself. If I cannot do it, and let it come to a time perhaps when I am mentally perhaps overused, let me find someone who help me to get to best understanding that. So it's all about us understand the position that I'm in, and then be able to understand what does the donor need, what examples resonate best for the donor, and let me come back as a key player within this. Where I cannot be able, let me pay away for someone who can be able to do that. I believe in that way I'll be able to rightly deliver service, and the end of it all, we are all going to celebrate and be able to hug one another. And then one more thing about this: when I walk alone without getting to know what I'm handling, I'm going to walk at times even blindfoldedly. But when we all come together as stakeholders that are providing.
Oh,
Oh no.
lost
Oh,
the
he was on
internet
a
for a
roll.
second here. I know he was so good too. I was going to say that was perfect. Oh, I think he's coming
Is he
back.
back?
Oh, Simon, we lost the last thing you said there. It was so perfect too. And then you froze. The internet froze, my friend.
Yeah, so I was just emphasizing and aiding it that we should be able to understand where we cannot and be able to give room to others. And so the example that I just felt I should give here is when I feel I'm exhausted and I no longer go on, let me identify someone perhaps on the team and someone who can best play it more than me. And then finally, when we are working as a team, at the end of it all, we are going to hug one another because we have all achieved, and in this we shall be able to do the work very well.
Mhm.
I love that. And I think sometimes I even myself get caught up in this, in not immersing myself frequently enough in listening to the communities. And so I don't even see the inequities because I'm not I'm not looking for them myself. And so I love those examples. Stacy, what would you add to this? What does shifting power actually look like?
Yeah, I want to focus really on this idea that a lot of organizations believe that asking for input is the same thing as sharing power, and it's simply not. It's that surface level engagement, like an advisory board here and there, or one-time surveys, or even this illusion that a diverse board of lived experiences is actually an empowered board of lived experiences, right? It depends on, are you creating a space that you actually listen to the voices that you're talking to, and you ask them to participate in the shaping of your programmatic work, and when you find out that it's no longer serving the mission the way it should be, that you're ready to adapt, even if it's hard, like even if it's uncomfortable, because it's no longer serving the core mission. I think that at 6 Degrees, we are really trying to move people beyond kind of this performative engagement. And we can do that because when we're doing these campaigns, or we're building content for these nonprofits, we often ask them these questions. What does their leadership look like? And how are they ready to adapt and change? And what does it look like for their constituents? Are they mirroring the people that they're serving? And are they listening to them? And how are they ready to implement the advice and counsel that they're getting from these groups of people? A good example of this is we don't ever pretend to be the experts. That's not what we're there for. We want to prioritize those like grassroots leaders that are culturally competent and community centered. So we created this conversation series really around, it's called the Disability Allyship Series with Jeremy Andrew Davis. And it was kind of the first of its kind in our programs. And now we're doing more with different types of leaders. But we create a space for this person to share content and educate around the disability community and what a true ally looks like, and to really just leverage our platform to be an extension of their own. And it's been incredible, the outpouring of people within the disability community being like, oh my God, thank you so much. Like, yes, I've been dealing with this for my entire life. And yes, this is the pandering that we experience. And yes, you come up with these different terms for you as an abled person, and because you're uncomfortable just calling me disabled. I mean, we learn so much, right? Like, I'm constantly in these rooms when we're talking about what content to put forward. And I'm like, that's incredible. I just learned something new. I want to make sure we're sharing that. And I think that doing more things like that, where you're actually creating space to have conversations and dialogue, and educate yourself as a team, like, I feel like that goes hand in hand. We don't have all the solutions. We haven't solved all of these issues, right? So we should be in a state of curiosity, and growth as well.
Yeah, I love the curious nonprofit. Someone needs to write that book. I haven't seen that title yet, but I love the curiosity standpoint. Matthew, that shifting power. I love that you all serve very different communities, because I'd love to hear, from the youth angle and the inequities that maybe are facing youth. What does this shift in power look like for your team?
Yeah, so this is a particularly thorny issue, because the world as we know it is built by systemic inequality. And even the people, and I love my board of directors, but the people who are able to serve on a board of directors are people who have been successful in this systemically unequal world, right? They have time and capital to share, which is a privilege. Yeah. And as Marx said quite presciently about the petit bourgeois, right? Like, their comfort is prioritized over true radical change. And I'm still kind of swimming in the swamp of how do you convince people who have benefited from the status quo to upend that status quo, right? Because if we really want to dismantle systemic inequalities, then we've got to attack the heart of capitalism. We've got to attack the root of the, proletariat versus bourgeois. We've really got to empower the disempowered, and you don't empower them to climb the same ladder that, has been mounted in capitalism, right? That's not how we empower people. By making one rich token is not the way to empower people. So we've really got to think about, from an organizational standpoint, how do we disrupt the status quo when the people who are driving us and the people who are funding us are benefiting from the status quo?
It's a really touchy subject, like you noted, and I don't think it's getting less touchy, which we won't go into an entire political nonprofit discussion. I wasn't prepared for that today, but I do think that these are some of the questions that are going to be coming up more and more, right, within nonprofit. I think we've always recognized it, but it's, this isn't something unknown, but it does make that shift of power really challenging, because you're right, there are people who are absolutely benefiting from those inequalities continuing in the current fashion. All right, so we lost Simon. I'm hoping he's going to show back up, because he had some great insights to share here as well. And this one is, I'm going to start with you, Matthew, and I feel like this kind of, leads right in, because I think our community members are often the people who we have to be building trust with, and they're not unaware of some of the inequalities that are out there as well. But what are some of the biggest mistakes you sometimes see organizations making when trying to build community trust, maybe trust back to your stakeholders as well? We're holding this middle ground of trust building.
Yeah, and I think I want to touch on the disability community because I served in the disability community and I'm a member of the disability community as well. And that paternalism that exists in the disability community tends to follow nonprofits, wherein Stacy really hit on this, right? Where nonprofits think they're the experts, and so they're going to do something for a constituency, right? We're going to do for our students. And no, we do with our constituency, right? We're not coming in as a parent. We're not coming in with the solution. We're coming in with curiosity, with a certain set of technical skills, but like we're handing the tool bag to the builders, right?
Yeah.
We're not holding it ourselves and saying we've got the solution and we're going to do it for you, right? It's teach a man to fish versus give a man a fish. You've got to do the work with the people.
Absolutely. I like the idea I've heard more frequently of your community being co-creators, right? Like they're creating with you. And you say the word with, and then like that co-create is when the magic happens. And you can almost see the situations in which co-creating is actually what's happening versus like an audience, like you have this community, but it's really an audience. And like, what does that mean to just be speaking at people, be offering programs that maybe don't have pickup and you wonder why? Well, was that what
And just to add something specifically in the disability world right now, in my state, we're an employment first state, right? And so when we write goals for individuals, say with autism, the goal is to get them a job, right? And the biggest con that capitalism has pulled on us is convincing us that a job is part of our dreams, right? When you ask people what they want to do, nobody says, I want to work, right? I'd love to be a laborer. Like, that's my dream. Like, no, if we want to do with people, we have to really hear them.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Stacy, when we're building, trust, what does that look like for you to date as you're trying to meld a lot of different communities and a lot of different constituent needs?
The number one thing it looks like is showing up with humility, which I think is what, Matthew's saying as well. Like, we have a real tendency to come in with you need to fund us because we are the end all be all. We have all the solutions. And what we're talking about just, 20 minutes ago, if we had all the solutions, we would all be worked out of a job, right? And like shifting missions to the new thing. I don't know is like super valid, right? And let's figure this out together is actually really powerful and extremely credibility building. And, I come from a background with sales and business development, and I can't tell you the amount of times I sat across from someone and told them, I don't know. I don't think that this solution is actually perfect for you today. You may want to look here or there. And I really approach what we do in this sector the same way. Like, I think it's going to take multiple hands and multiple programs and nonprofits coming together and collaborating and merging, if you will, to solution build something that's actually efficacious and long term. But I think that letting communities lead is so important. And we've said that a few times. There's a lot of organizations that have done this really well. It's like when there's a huge natural disaster and you kind of like, fly in these huge entities, these big organizations that are bringing people in from the outside. Yeah, there's a use case for that for sure. But like, what about all of like the veterinarians and the chefs and the people that can know the community, know the language, know what's needed right there? Like, why don't we like give them the support so that they can help their own community much better than an outsider that's coming in and saying, hey, this is the way we do it every time we drop into a disaster zone. I mean, that's just kind of one example. I think it's just really, really, really critical to not look at things in transactional ways and to lead with humility.
I love that. And Jelani had a great comment here about tokenism, right? And you have to be very careful for sure with, community is a give and take. And we have to be very careful that it's not as a nonprofit, that we're not taking more from the community than what we're potentially giving back. And I don't see that often. Like I don't know if it's who I'm surrounding myself with, but I don't see that very often. But it is something to keep top of mind. And it's an uncomfortable question to be asking ourselves, but maybe, that needs to be, more of a guiding star when it comes to building trust. So if anybody has questions, we're going to get right to the end of this. Simon, I'm coming back to you because I want to hear your answer to this question, but we've only got another 5 minutes, folks. You all have been amazing. The comments are crazy. So many wonderful comments coming in. Simon, I'd love to, sorry. Oh, it looks like your microphone might be muted, my friend. Let me see if I can try to unmute it for you. It's still muted. I'm not sure. If you can unmute yourself, Simon, please do. If people have comments or questions they'd like to ask of these wonderful panelists, got so much wonderful feedback here. Oh, Simon, can I hear you right now? Oh, I think you might be frozen. Okay. So the only other thing, if either of you, sorry, Simon, I can't figure out how to unmute you, my friend. Does any of you have a real world example of this redistribution that you've done in your communities? Hey, we're noticing something is uneven here. We're now heading back out to try to figure out how to do this redistribution with your community. And Simon, if you can jump in, that's great. If people have great comments they'd like to bring in as well, totally awesome. But I think this is what I am super curious about is what does it look like to just do that shift in real life, in real practice out in the world?
I can think of an example, particularly where the desires of the students didn't jive with the funders' desires. Mm-hmm. Our filmmaking program is partially funded by our local cable station, our county cable station, and they want public service announcements on a certain theme. And one of my cohorts was like, yeah, we don't want to do that. We don't want to do those. We want to instead focus on artificial intelligence and AI's impact on education. And I was like, well, okay. Then I'm not going to pursue that funding stream because we're not going to be able to deliver those deliverables. And I'm going to have to find a different way to fund your program. But I'm not going to force you into this cookie cutter if you really don't want to do it. That's not what I'm here for.
I love that. And was that the voice of the gathered voice of the students coming back that you shared then with the funder?
I didn't share it with the funder. I just didn't chase that grant for that program because I knew it was a mismatch. So if anyone wants to fund public service announcements on AI and the impact on education,
there is a grant out there.
Passionforlearning.org, right? And you just donate.
Okay. I love that. I love that. Stacy, do you have any examples in the 6 Degrees networking community?
Yeah, because this is the cone of trust. So we did a big music benefit a few years ago, and someone that was, we'll call it on the advisory board, offered a very large gift. We're talking about 6 figures, and they were kind of a music executive type, but they really were doing it to place their own artists right on the show and almost as an executive producer. And we had nonprofits we were serving. This was a fundraiser for organizations around racial justice and hunger and these sorts of things that said, oh no, this artist actually doesn't work because there's some controversies here and we don't want to kind of make this about that. We need to keep our mission centered, really thoughtful things. And we're here to what? We're here to serve the nonprofits. We're here to fundraise for these organizations and make them feel really good about how we are centering the work that they're doing. And so we said, oh, we're so sorry, we can't place this artist. And we had to walk away from that 6-figure gift. Does that hurt? Yeah, of course it hurts. It's that's a lot of money, but also it feels really good. It feels really good to say this isn't the right fit. We're going to show up for these organizations that we're doing this all for, and we want to do it in a way that makes them feel really seen and heard and valued. And because of that, others stepped up. They were like, oh, that pulled back? Well, we're not going to let that happen. Like we're gonna work harder. Everyone else kind of just pushed in and leaned in and really helped us catapult that so much further than it would have otherwise. And so what I do believe that shows is oftentimes when we're sticking to our values, who we are, we're in alignment, like things will work out. And that's not just like altruistic. Like I'm talking about funders that will come alongside you, your partners, your board, your staff, your team. People will want to work harder because they are in alignment. They know you're not wishy-washy, you're just chasing a buck. They know that you actually care about making sure the power dynamics are in check. And so, yeah, that's a real life example from our work.
And that's a big deal. I mean, that's a lot of money to walk away from. But like you said, sometimes you find your community by going, here are our values. This is what we do out in the world. And if anything, when your values are stronger, more of the right people seem to find you, right? Whether it's 'cause you're louder about them or it's not wishy-washy, right? Like you said, like people aren't going to question it. They're like, yeah, I want to work with a group like this. They're amazing. And they're very clear about how they move in the world. I love that.
Absolutely.
Simon, I can't tell. Poor Simon's having crazy internet issues today, which is so unfortunate because I really wanted to hear some of what he had to say. Our comments have been amazing. You know, there's so many, I couldn't even bring everything in because there was so many wonderful comments happening in the side today, which was amazing. Thank you to you both. Thank you to Simon. I'm going to have to get him, like Matt said, I'm going to have to get some recordings of Simon's stuff and throw them into our final product here because I know he has so many wonderful insights. Thank you both for having the wherewithal to step into this conversation. I know it's not that comfortable. When we put out this idea, there was a limited number of people who were like, I'm in for this. This is amazing. So I really thank you both because I think it's really important. And we've got a fun, similar kind of vein, but a little bit different because our next one's called We Are Doing This to Ourselves. And it's kind of focused in on nonprofit work and some of the things we see in the nonprofit workplace that maybe we need to be a little reflective internally to some of the workplace culture as well. So thank you both so much. You're amazing. Really appreciate you, Matthew and Stacy. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, really grateful for the opportunity. And if anyone in the audience is not a member of the Hive, the nonprofit Hive, get your butts in here.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And yeah, Matt's longtime member. Some of the 6 Degrees team has joined us. Really thankful. Thanks, guys.